Let's start with what could come next as tensions grow between Canada and China. We're waiting for the May 23rd decision on whether a public inquiry into foreign interference will happen. It appears the feds, though, are moving ahead on creating a foreign agents registry to help prevent countries like China from meddling in Canada's affairs. That news follows a significant decision from the feds to expel a Chinese diplomat implicated in 2021 CSIS intelligence for targeting Tory MP Michael Chong and Chong's family. The allegation was first reported by the Globe and Mail, and the Prime Minister insists he first learned about the threat through the media.
We decided that we needed to move forward in a responsible way to send a very clear message that we will not accept foreign interference, and regardless of whatever next choices they make, we will not be intimidated.
In a tit for tat, China immediately kicked out a Canadian diplomat posted in Shanghai. China denies any interference allegations and is warning it will, quote, fight back resolutely and forcefully, and the Canadian side must bear all the consequences. For more on all of that, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino is here. Hi, Minister Mendicino. Good to have you back in studio.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. About a week, now 2 weeks ago almost, you and the Prime Minister essentially said the way in which CSIS has been operating when it comes to threats against MPs is going to change. Now the directive is to inform MPs about those threats. Since you issued that directive, how many MPs have been briefed by CSIS?
Well, I'm going to come to that, but first I think it's important to take a step back and recognize that foreign interference is a very challenging and sensitive issue. And certainly over the last couple of years, it has become even more complex, which is why we have a plan that is focused on preventing harm to our democratic institutions by providing proactive briefings to parliamentarians.
So the briefings that you reference there are not the same as the briefings you've issued a directive on in the past 2 weeks. Those are defensive briefings that Michael Chong says he received that contain no specific information, for example, about the threats against him as an individual or his family, as it turns out. So my question was about the period of time since you've issued that directive. How many MPs have been informed that there have been threats against them since then?
Yeah, and I understand why you were asking that question, and obviously I am not at liberty to talk about individual cases because of the law. And the laws that we have put into place under the Security of Information Act are there not only to protect the people that work in our institutions within security and intelligence, but also the people that we are trying to protect as well as parliamentarians. What I can tell you is that we will continue to provide briefings and support so that members of Parliament and indeed all parliamentarians can do their job free and clear from foreign interference.
What is the law that prevents you from saying 20 MPs have been briefed in the last 2 weeks about potential threats versus you confirming 2 weeks ago that Michael Chong was targeted? Like, is it a bit of pick and choose what you'd like to be forthcoming about?
Well, one of the things that precipitated the discussion we're having right now regarding Mr. Chong was a leak, and that is something that is also concerning. But it's important
that we... But you confirmed that leak.
Well, what we have done is we've confirmed that we have taken action by providing briefings to Mr. Chong because we care for his security as well as his family, as well as everybody else that works within our democratic institutions. And that is why we've been vigilant about this. That is why we have given CSIS additional powers to reduce the threats around foreign interference.
But that's exactly why I'm asking that question. And I'm not pretending to anyone here that you're not doing anything. Your government isn't doing anything. You've done a lot of things and you've recounted them now. But clearly, there's still a gap, right? Clearly, Canada found out 2 weeks ago that a sitting member of Parliament was targeted, and as a result, since then, your government has expelled a diplomat. I'm trying to figure out, on behalf of those Canadians watching right now, what is the scope of the interference that is taking place? And in particular, what is the scope of the threat sitting members of Parliament face vis-a-vis China?
And I think the direct answer to your question lies in, among other things, in the annual report, which I just tabled a little less than 2 weeks ago, which spells out in great detail the measures that we are taking to protect parliamentarians from foreign interference, among other threats to our national security. And those proactive briefings are a way to inform and educate parliamentarians who work in this space.
They didn't do that for Michael Chong. So you're saying they did for everybody else that
well,
got one?
I think it's a two-way exercise. These are conversations. And look, I in no way rule out the potential that we will continue to refine our measures and our processes going forward. We learn a lot from parliamentarians, and we want to make sure that they are safe and secure. That is the top priority for the government when it comes to protecting our democratic institutions. And I I assure you that we are using every lever at our disposal to make sure that we achieve that goal.
I know that you said that the Globe and Mail's report on Michael Chong specifically was the first time you learned of him being targeted. Had you, however, heard anything else in previous years or prior to that about the diplomat in question, Zhao Wei, and nefarious activities on his part?
Well, once again, I am constrained by the law for good reason as to what I can share about classified briefings. And I think,
you've just kicked him out of the country, and you can't tell Canadians whether you knew he was doing anything prior to Michael Chong?
Whether or not he is here or back in a different country is irrelevant. What is relevant is that my obligations under the law are there to protect people and their lives, including the people that work within our democratic institutions. So that's an important principle, because I think for all Canadians that there do need to be some rules of the road as we talk about national security, as we talk about classified information.
The Globe is also reporting, though, that CSIS has had intelligence for years on this diplomat. What I am asking you is not to break the law, it's to tell Canadians that they can be confident that your government wasn't aware that this diplomat was taking pictures of Chinese dissidents in this country or keeping track of them and reporting back to the Chinese regime. If you had known about that, shouldn't they be confident that you would have expelled him earlier than you did?
And they can be confident. They can be confident because we have put in place new threat reduction measure powers, because more recently we have concluded a public consultation that will inform the creation of a foreign agent registry, because we have put in place additional resources that will help to protect Canadians who themselves may be the target of foreign interference. All of these things we are doing to make sure that we are vigilant in protecting ourselves against this evolving threat around foreign interference.
But what you're saying essentially amounts to trust us. You're not directly answering the question of whether this diplomat was doing something wrong and your government just refused to expel him until it became public through news media reporting.
Well, first, expelling a foreign diplomat is a very serious measure. I would point that out. And secondly, I would encourage the various examples that and the measures that we have put in place when it comes to protecting ourselves from foreign interference. And this is not just trust us. This is taking a look at the very concrete authorities and powers and measures that we have invested.
I know that there are national security implications, but at the flip side, Canadians are reading day in and day out of new instances of foreign interference that your government in the past week has said they didn't even know about. Despite all the things you're talking about, despite all the measures you've put in place, you didn't even know Michael Chong was being targeted.
Well, I would point out that we are transparent about the use of these authorities. So when CSIS uses powers under Section C-59, they report about that. When we have a site panel that is put in place, this is the panel that is made up of the clerk, the National Security Intelligence Advisor, deputy ministers who are there to make sure that Canadians are aware of any threats to elections. They issue reports. When we appoint David Johnston to come up with a set of recommendations, he will set up a report and issue that publicly.
Just before I let you go, let me ask you about the foreign agents registry that you mentioned. La Presse is reporting that it's actually going to happen. I think you've just wrapped the consultations, that it's actually going to happen, that you'll introduce it this year. That registry in the United States, which has been in place for a while, allowed law enforcement there to use it to arrest people associated with Chinese police stations, so-called police stations operating in the U.S. Do you regret not having those tools available to you here?
Well, look, we want to set this tool up as quickly as we can, but we also have to do it in the right way. And I can tell you that the conversations that I've had through the consultation period have been very informative and instructive on who are the principals that will be required to register, what are the types of activities that will be required to be registered, what are the consequences if there's any breaches of the registry, and how can we be public about this work. So this is exactly the work that we are laser-like focused on.
Do you concede that not all of those so-called police stations have been shut down?
What I can tell you is that I am confident that the RCMP have taken concrete action to disrupt any foreign interference in relationship to those so-called police stations, and that if new police stations are popping up and so on, that they will continue to take decisive action going forward.
The two groups in Quebec who are accused of hosting the police stations, say the RCMP have not taken any actions against them. You have said very specifically, not what you just said there, but you said that the RCMP have taken decisive action to shut down. You said in a quote to committee last month, the so-called police stations. How can both things be true? Do you concede that they're not all shut down?
Because first, the RCMP take their steps operationally independent from government, and I think that's also important. It is not for elected government to go out and conduct these investigations. Second, as they have said publicly through their news releases, that they are taking decisive steps to disrupt those activities that are in relationship to so-called police stations.
You said they'd been shut down, though. They're not all shut down.
Disrupted means shut down, but if there are other foreign interference activities in relationship to these so-called police stations, yes, our expectation is that they will act, but that has to be done in a manner that is consistent with operational independence.
I'm just confused then. So are the police stations, the so-called Chinese police stations in this country, all shut down or not?
When it comes to these types of inquiries, we obviously rely on the RCMP to keep Canadians abreast. But my job is to make sure...
You have communicated to a committee, though, that they were all shut down.
Vashi, when we said that, we were obviously very clear that at the time the RCMP had taken, in the past tense, decisive action. That doesn't mean that there can't be new foreign interference activities. Our expectation is that if those activities manifest, if there is foreign interference, that yes, the RCMP will take decisive action as they have in the past. And my job as the Minister of Public Safety is to make sure that they have the tools and the resources and all of the technology that they need to do that job, and I'm confident that they will.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your time, as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vash.